Meanwhile, we are just weeks away from the Virginia gubernatorial race. Democrat candidate Terry McAuliffe now coming under fire for this, walking out of a local TV interview. Watch this.
Okay. All right, we're over. That's it. That's it. Hey, I gave you extra time. Come on, man. You should have asked better questions.
So here's some context. The station says it gave 20 minutes for the interview for both McAuliffe and Republican candidate Glenn Youngkin. But McAuliffe's interview lasted only 10 minutes before he exited stage left. Youngkin reportedly sat for the entire 20-minute interview.
Yeah, well, let's bring our panelists in for reaction here. Former New York Congressman Peter King and host of the Follow the Prophet podcast, David Grasso, and Jacquie Jordan, host of the Front and Center with Jacquie Jordan podcast. Good to see everybody here, and thanks so much for coming on. Let me start with David on this one here. WJLA, the affiliate there in D.C., ABC, essentially allotting equal time, but we saw again what appeared to be a frustrated McAuliffe cutting that interview short.
Well, it's really difficult for McAuliffe because the Democratic Party is really held hostage right now by woke employees and Twitter activists. And really what Terry McAuliffe is doing, while it's terrible for that poor journalist, and my heart goes out to him because that's what I used to do, is interview politicians, I want to point out that Terry McAuliffe is avoiding the tough issues. And these are the issues that will decide the election. And he's embracing a theory that's popular right now called popularism, right? And what popularism is talking about the things that are popular and avoiding the things that are not popular. And the things that Terry McAuliffe didn't want to answer, such as mandates and what they're teaching in the classroom, are hot button issues right now, and he was probably smart to avoid those issues.
Well, he just said he didn't like those questions, so he offered criticism for the news media. And as you point out, you feel bad for the guy who's just doing their job, asking those questions. But also you point out the fact that McAuliffe has come under fire recently for comments he made about parents and their kids' education. Watch this moment.
I'm not going to let parents come into schools and actually take books out and make their own decision.
You vetoed it.
So, yeah, I stopped the bill that I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
And that was at a recent debate saying parents shouldn't tell schools what they should teach, but he did come out with a brand new ad, this amid the backlash from the comments. Here's that.
As parents, Dorothy and I have always been involved in our kids' education. We know good schools depend on involved parents. That's why I want you to hear this from me. Glenn Youngkin's taking my words out of context. I've always valued the concerns of parents. It's why as governor we scaled back standardized testing, expanded pre-K, and invested $1 billion in public schools.
All right, Jacquie Jordan, are these words taken out of context? Is it too little too late for McAuliffe here?
Well, as a media coach, media consultant who's actually consulted for many politicians, I think McAuliffe's words and reactions are showing his impertinence and intemperance around some of these items. And it shows you also why someone has been in politics way too long. You wouldn't show this type of temperament in with the media and on your public speaking if you were new to the table. And it just shows you again how important this Virginia race is to the Democrats. And I also think that all of the narratives are slipping apart, and I just don't even think that they can hold themselves or hold it together at this time.
Well, to talk about holding it together, Trafalgar polls showing what you're saying, Republican candidate for Virginia Governor Youngkin leading now McAuliffe, 47% and a half. Again here, Peter King, no stranger to politics. Obviously, there's going to be a margin of error. You can read this as a number slipping from McAuliffe. McAuliffe did have not a comfortable lead, but a lead. And now Youngkin's rising. Is it showing you, how do you read this? Is it showing you that parents and schools, and this is really playing a part in this specific race?
All the indicators are that Terry McAuliffe knows he's in trouble. The Trafalgar poll obviously is an example of that. But more so is the way he's reacting. I've been in politics a long time, and generally you don't react the way McAuliffe did unless you're worried, unless you're nervous. To walk out of an interview and you would still 10 minutes to go, that's a sign of a nervous candidate. More even than that is putting on an ad where you're defending yourself, where you have to say, I'm being unfairly attacked, this was taken out of context. That shows he's nervous. Anytime you're defending something you said or you feel the need to do it, that shows that the polls, that his internal polls show that he's definitely slipping. I think what we saw in Trafalgar is really an indication of what McAuliffe himself is seeing from his own pollsters. And at this stage of the campaign, I would say if the Trafalgar poll is accurate, and it probably is, that 1 point lead may be 2, 3, or 4 points by tomorrow. Because it's, to me, the Republican is going up, McAuliffe is going down. And that's a bad way to be when it's only 12 days to election.
Well, in that meantime, though, we know Vice President Kamala Harris is set to campaign on behalf of McAuliffe, and then former President Barack Obama is also going to be turning out the vote. And of course, we've seen recently major presence in response for Youngkin. He held an event. It was packed with parents in the room. Our panelists, please stay with us. We've got another topic to get to right on the other side of this break.
Yeah, up next, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki on the defense when questioned by reporters about why migrants were being flown to the Big Apple in the dead of night. That is next. Meanwhile, this White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki a little defensive when questioned by reporters about why the Biden administration is flying unaccompanied migrant children in a new report in the middle of the night to New York and other states. Here's what she said.
I'm not sure that it's in the middle of the night, but let me tell you what's happening here.
It is our 4:29 a.m.
Well,
very early in the morning.
Here we are talking about early flights, earlier than you might like to take a flight.
Okay, our panelists are back now to discuss Peter King, David Grasso, Jacquie Jordan. And Jacquie, we'll start with you. You've got a background in branding and media coaching as well. What do you make of Jen Psaki's tone when she is answering a very relevant question?
Important. Emma, thank you. She's so flippant and disregarding that it's actually painful to watch. Americans deserve the answers to what is happening to these children. It's almost coming across as government trafficking of children and minors. I know she ends her flippant comment with saying, well, they're going to vetted sources. Well, we'd like to know more information about who these vetted sources are and where they're going and if they're being reunited with families appropriately so. And, her dismissal of it being dropped in the middle of the night, and as you can hear the reporter saying, and I'm not really sure which reporter it was, but he said, 4:30 in the morning. We've had it here. It's happening all over the country, and she hasn't really responded to it. And the strategy by the White House press secretary of dismissing things and by throwing it back at the reporter and not giving specifics and sweeping it under the rug has to stop. I think Americans deserve answers.
Let me get to Peter King, a former representative for New York in the House. This report points to New York and other regions of the Northeast. How concerned are you that, given that there's no real evidence of the COVID testing on the migrants that we've seen, we haven't really had an answer on that other than if they're experiencing symptoms, they will test them. And then clearly, obviously, just the sheer fact of bringing them to the state of New York, Westchester County specifically, in the middle of the night, according to that New York Post report. How concerning is that? And will this expand to other states like we've seen in Florida?
This is extremely concerning to me, and I have almost a personal stake in this. It was my district, especially in communities like Central Islip and Brentwood, that were the centerpiece of MS-13 activity in the past decade. This started in 2014 when unaccompanied minors were sent into my district without any vetting of the young people themselves, no vetting of the families they're with. Many of these so-called young kids were agents or operatives of MS-13. We went through a period where there were 25 murders in 18 months carried out entirely within the immigrant community by MS-13. It wasn't until President Trump got involved that's now been reduced to zero. But it all began, or certainly heightened, with the influx of undocumented young people coming in, being assigned by the federal government. The federal government gives no money to the local school districts to educate these kids, no extra money for social services, and they don't tell the police who's coming in. They have no way of knowing who's in the country. And again, we had this. It was horrible. It was a horrible carnage that went on in my district because of this exact same policy 7 years ago.
Yeah, the minimal information that we're getting is pointing to these being unaccompanied minors, they're young kids, separated from their families, being shipped across the countries to different places. David, this is a story that you would think every media outlet would be tracking and trying to get to the bottom of. Where is the curiosity from the majority of media outlets and press reporters in that briefing room?
Well, I think you're pointing at something that this whole panel is talking about. You were talking about the press room. When's the last time we saw civility in that room? It's been quite a long time, not in my professional career. And as far as immigration, yeah, we did see a lot of coverage about unaccompanied minors by the mainstream media during the Trump era. And now we're noticing that the Biden administration is behaving very similarly to the Trump administration. Yet we don't hear a lot about it in the mainstream media because that doesn't fit the narrative. Immigration is something we've kicked the can down the road for so long that at this point it's an acute problem. We need a lot of solutions that are going to make both sides uncomfortable, but unfortunately there doesn't seem to be a lot of appetite or bandwidth these days in Washington to solve these problems.
Yeah, we're going to keep asking the questions. It's important to do so. Our panelists, thank you so much for the conversation and analysis. We appreciate it.